Hello, my name is Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Literary Love 123, where I read, discuss, and analyze horror through a literary lens. So, after this quick intro, I'm going to come right back and tell you why I may have already read my favorite books of 2025. So clearly, both of the books I talk about in this video are 5-star reads for me because I feel like the other books I read for the remainder of the year have a lot of work to do in order to hit as high on my list as these two books I'm talking about today. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is The Devil in Silver by Victor LaValle. So, The Devil in Silver was originally published in 2012, and this edition that I have was published in 2025. As you can see, a lot of this book was worthy of annotation, in my opinion, and so let's talk about it. So, in The Devil in Silver, we start the beginning with the character of Pepper. So, he is a man who gets into a fight with some police officers. However, he is, in his mind anyway, trying to defend this woman that he loves from her abusive ex. He doesn't even know that these men are police officers because they are dressed in like street clothes. So he gets wrongfully sent to a mental institution, and we find out a bit about why that is at a later time. But once he enters into this mental institution, he begins to uncover the corruption, the lack of care that most mentally ill, and I say most, I don't know from everybody's experience, but I have been in place psychiatric care inpatient back in 2017 for a week. So a lot of the things that Pepper experiences while being institutionalized, I could definitely identify with. So because he's scared and because he's agitated, then they assume that he must be mentally ill. And there's nothing wrong with being mentally ill. Like I said, I myself am, but not everyone who is acting agitated or afraid needs to be medicated. And he is really forcefully medicated. There's a point in the novel where he turns down medication and then they don't feed him. So you are getting an in-depth look at the way the mentally ill are treated or mistreated. So he encounters people of different races, people of different ethnicities, people of different ages. And Pepper is a white man, and he also has to, or he doesn't have to, but I guess he's confronted with some truths that he hadn't thought about before. So he does start to deconstruct the prejudices and the misjudgments and the false beliefs that he once held. He finds out what it's like to be targeted. He finds out what it's like to be stereotyped. There's a part where he talks about some of the younger black men that he worked with because he worked on a furniture moving crew, and he talks about what they've said about police officers, and he was of the mentality and even told them, well, if you just, if you're not breaking the law, you have nothing to worry about. If you're not doing anything wrong, you don't have anything to be afraid of. But that belief comes back to really bite Pepper in the butt as he finds out, it's not the same, but it's enough of an experience for him to rethink the way he's thought when he finds himself being misjudged or mistreated or assumed to be something by nurses and doctors. He really then begins to find out just how ignorant he was of life, and he begins to see others' experiences. There's also a woman who we find out, this may be a little bit spoiler, but I really can't talk about this book without talking about it. This woman who's a patient, we find out that she is an immigrant, and maybe she didn't come to the United States through legal means when she was a very, very young child. But this is the only place she's ever known. And we get her perspective. We find out what it's like to go to immigration court, and I need to do some more research, but I pretty much believe this is probably accurate, because in the novel, she talks about how she doesn't get an attorney in immigration court. She is supposed to have a translator, but she doesn't need a translator because she has been in the United States since she was like 4 or 5. So she clearly can speak English, but the judge refuses to hear her case because he keeps demanding that she have a translator. And so she's left then not even able to go through the right channels. And I just feel like all of this is so relevant and so important today. There are some horrible experiences that we read about in the context of this fictional narrative. However, Victor LaValle drew on actual experiences of mentally ill people and their treatment or mistreatment or abuse. There's an actual headline that's like, one of the chapters is just this headline from the New York Times. So I looked that up online to see if that was an actual headline, and it is, and it's horrifying. So be prepared going into this that you're going to encounter mental illness, you're going to encounter abuse of the mentally ill, and there were parts that were definitely hard for me to read just as a human being with compassion and empathy, and other parts that were particularly hard for me to read based on my own experiences in inpatient psychiatric care. So there's also a devil, the title here, the devil in silver. There's this devil or beast that is in the mental institution. And as the story goes on, you find out maybe that devil or beast is not what you initially thought it was. And I have some quotes that I want to read to you that I feel like would emphasize some of these points that I'm talking about. So I'll show you, I did do a journal spread for The Devil in Silver. So this is my journal spread. And I want to talk a little bit about it. But before I do that, I want to talk about this quote at the beginning of the novel. And that will also kind of explain to you a little bit more. I feel like it's pretty clear, like the straight jacket base here, but these sunflowers, because there is some discussion of Vincent van Gogh, which again relates to mental illness. And I want to just talk a little bit about the quote that Victor LaValle has in the beginning of the book, which is a quote from Van Gogh speaking about his own experiences as a mentally ill patient. And this really sets the tone or the idea for this novel. Even though, as I mentioned, it is brutal and it is hard to read, it's also so filled with love and semblances of hope. So I don't want you to think it's all heavy, but it is heavy. But I just want you to know that there is some joy to be found here. So the Vincent van Gogh quote that we start with is, "The fear, the horror that I had of madness before is already greatly softened. And although one continually hears shouts and terrible howls as though the animals in a menagerie, despite this, the people here know each other very well and help each other when they suffer crises. So I'm going to get really personal there, because the first night I was in inpatient care, I heard a man screaming and hollering down the hallway. And I was terrified. I felt almost like I was having this out of body experience, like much like Pepper has when he goes into the mental institution and he's confused and he can't really understand why he's really here, and he thinks he doesn't belong here, and it's just kind of all this stuff is happening to him, and he can't process it, because that's exactly how I felt. I felt like, who am I? Who is this person? I felt like I was watching myself. And it was also very scary to be in that place and to hear someone screaming. I just had no idea what was coming. But on the brighter part of this Van Gogh quote, where he talks about, despite all of that, the people here know each other and help each other when they suffer crises. During the time I was there, I developed a close relationship with my roommate and with several other patients that were there at the same time I was. And I began to hear their life stories. And I began to see that I had my own, even as someone with a mental illness, I still had my own prejudices and misconceptions and judgments of other people with mental illness. So I really want to commend Victor LaValle for putting that element into this book, to bringing to the forefront the layers of prejudice that we can hold against other people. And it's not done in a way that doesn't feel natural. Everything that he writes, all of these different elements of the ways that we can have misconceptions or perceive other people, it's just such an organic way throughout the novel. And there were times I would have to put the book down and just take a break, sometimes because I was emotional and sometimes because I really wanted to think about what was being said, and I wanted to check myself for any of the biases that I was holding on to. So now I want to talk about a few of the quotes that I put in my journal page. So, why decorate the walls with someone else's dreams of peace? And then this next quote that I want to talk about is in relation to what I previously mentioned about Pepper's thoughts about police officers and about this belief that, if you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't be afraid. Here's what Pepper thinks. And this is after he has been, watched. They want to watch and make sure he's taking his medicine. They stick their fingers around in his mouth and under his tongue to make sure he's not hiding his pills. So he thinks, this wasn't about an infraction, but dictating a philosophy of life. Certain types of people must be overseen. So that's when he really starts to understand it's not about, breaking the rules in this mental institution. Out in society, it's not about, it's not about breaking laws. It's about this prejudiced view that certain types of people or certain groups of people have to be watched over, that certain groups of people can't be trusted, or certain groups of people are always up to no good. So he begins to realize that he has been placed now in a group like that, and he has to readjust his thoughts about not just himself, but especially about others that he thought he knew, and he thought, like some people do, that just because he had not had certain experiences, that those experiences couldn't be true. And he has to eat his words in that and realize where he's been wrong. And then there's this next quote I want to talk about. And yes, I am on medication. And yes, I attend, therapy sessions, but I do have major depressive disorder with suicidal ideation. And I really I accept that I'm always going to have that. So I've heard the platitudes and I've heard all the, whatevers from different realms. So please don't come in here and tell me, one day it could get better. No, I have accepted that this is an illness that I will have for the rest of my life. But I can do things that help me cope with it. But this quote just really spoke to me on that realm of things. They were like ships that would never find a shore. The most you could do was bring them supplies. The most they could do was get used to the rocking, the unpredictability of the vast ocean underneath them. I feel that so much. All I can do is to take the supplies or the tools that I'm given and navigate these waters. Smooth sometimes, other times choppy and rough, other times I'm drowning. And I just felt like that was a perfect metaphor for my experience with mental illness. And then I want to give a hopeful quote from the end of The Devil in Silver. He hoped to reflect the world's own glory with love, an artistic impulse, but not exclusive to artists. The aspiration is so rarely rewarded or even understood that most people don't even try. But wherever it's found, whenever it's displayed, it's an act of genius. I thought it was beautiful to have your mission to show the glory of the world through love. And I really can't top that. But read The Devil in Silver if you haven't already. Whew, okay. And the next 5-star book that I read recently is To Be Devoured by Sara Tantlinger. And I was going to read this anyway, but I also wanted to read it the first week of March because it's Women's History Month. And I forgot to also mention I wanted to read The Devil in Silver anyway, having read other books from Victor LaValle and loved them. But I specifically read The Devil in Silver for the I Love Black Horror Readathon, which is hosted by Kel Sweetie, and I will link her channel down below. So I will get back to now To Be Devoured. Again, this is a book that deals with depression, grief, and rage. And it is so beautifully disgusting and so gloriously brutal. I couldn't put it down. I finished it in like a day. It's only 83 pages. So this book, To Be Devoured by Sara Tantlinger, was published in 2023, I think. Let me double check that. I looked right before I started. Yes, 2023. And this book, we have our main character, Andy, and she is in a relationship with Luna. And Andy has been dealt some very difficult, very painful losses in life. Brutal. Please check content and trigger warnings before you go into To Be Devoured. I won't get into them here because there would be quite a few. So be sure you check that. But she has been dealt some horrible, horrible losses in life in very awful ways. So she's got this grief she's dealing with, but there's also rage. And what I definitely feel as someone with major depressive disorder, I really don't want to diagnose a character with that, but there were so many things that she thought and said that are word for word I've thought or said. Don't worry, not everything. If you read this book, not everything, but some things, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But she becomes obsessed with vultures and this idea of why do I have trouble saying it? Devouring and being devoured. And I feel like that's a great metaphor for grief, rage, and major depressive disorder, because you feel at times that you are being devoured by that. And then sometimes you yourself may tend to devour people in certain ways, whether you intend to do so or not. I don't want to say too much about it, but one of the things that I did want to mention, and this is not something I came up with on my own. I read the introduction before I went in, and the introduction is written by LaValle, and I just want to read what she says. There is imagery and symbolism, the use of color and metaphor. Expertly executed literary devices make To Be Devoured a book that balances. No, it doesn't just balance, it dances upon the imaginary line drawn between literary and genre horror. It should be taught in classrooms for the narrator's journey alone. It should be explored for its use of symbolism, the colors green and black, and how they relate to light and dark, life and death, and the dynamics of Andy and Luna's relationship. Now, I will be making a journal spread for this one, but let me just share some of the quotes for you. I don't want to share that one, so hold up. I know I should have made my journal page for this before I came on to talk about it, but I just really wanted to go ahead and talk about it. She's talking about Luna. This is Andy, the main character. Again, if you think back to what LaValle talked about in the introduction, the idea of darkness and light and life and death, Andy describes Luna as the moon to my sun, keeping me balanced in a world where my own brain wages civil war with emotions. So I thought, first of all, that's a beautiful quote talking about just that idea that Andy depends on Luna to be this source of life for her. Then the second part of that quote, where she talks about her brain waging civil war with her emotions, I can completely relate to that as my own dealings with depression. The idea that my brain is actively fighting against me every minute of every day, and this is constant war where I have to push back against those negative, cruel things that my mind says to me about me. Another quote that I want to share is, for whatever reason, my mind has entrapped itself in a dark place this week, the kind of darkness where it's better to avoid the people you love. I get that so much. Just the idea of, first of all, just being so encumbered with your own depression and the darkness you feel, and just the extreme, I mean, tiredness really doesn't even begin to touch the surface, but I'm talking about too tired to dial a phone. I guess that's my Gen X showing. Too tired to even pick up the phone and hit the buttons to make a phone call. Too tired to do anything, even things you love. Just that idea. You're so entombed in that darkness. And then not only are you feeling that way, like avoiding people, but also at times in my depression, I will lash out or be irritable at the people I love. So I also don't want to subject them to that. So I'm in this place and very much isolated. And so I could really understand what Andy was saying about feeling that way. And then another quote, and there are several, but I'm going to stop at this one so I won't, give you too many quotes because I want you to read the book yourself. Our deaths deserve no other meaning than to be devoured. Our bodies have ruined the earth. It seems only right such bodies should give back to nature, to the animals, because then it does not matter if society declares your face or skin or features wrong. We are all bodies waiting to be swallowed into soil, into the ocean. And so I get that, because she talks about there, then nobody can tell you that your face is wrong, your body's wrong, your your mental illness is wrong. You are wrong. You're gone, and you're just replenishing or going back into nature. And so this book and Devil in Silver, 5 stars, as I mentioned before. Maybe my favorite reads of the year. We're only in March, so we got a lot of year to go. But let me just give a heads up to all the other books that I read in 2026. You got some stiff competition. So I would love to know what you've read recently that you've given 5 stars to. I'd also love to know if you've read To Be Devoured or The Devil in Silver and what you thought about those books. Thank you so much for watching. I would truly appreciate it if you would hit like, hit subscribe, hit that bell so we can keep on talking about books that have quickly made it to our top favorite books of the year. I will see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day, night, or evening, wherever you may be.